Starting off with the popular band Fall Out Boy, their album Mania, and they are a pop rock four-piece and this is their seventh album, and it's been 3 years since the band released the album American Beauty / American Psycho, which surprisingly was pretty good for a Fall Out Boy record. And then again, it was actually my first time reviewing an album, so I was not as cynical as I am now. A small amount of the population are familiar with the group's pop punk sound that they showcased in the 2003 debut album, Take This to Your Grave. But most people know them for their alternative rock and emo albums they released later, like albums like From Under the Cork Tree and Infinity on High. And that album had songs like Sugar We're Going Down, Dance Dance, and This Ain't a Scene, It's an Arm Race. Now, as you can plainly see, having long song titles is a staple in emo music. Now, Drew, were you a fan of Fall Out Boy, or are you more a fan of Radioactive Man's sidekick, Fall Out Boy?
Up and at them is all I have to say.
Okay, good point. So, Fall Out Boy has 3 stages of the career: pop punk, emo, and what they're doing now, and you were not a fan of any of it at the time.
I'm not a fan of Fall Out Boy, period.
Okay, so I agree. I understand that. So we'll see if this album swayed him anyway. So after their 2009 hiatus, Fall Out Boy reformed in 2013 and released the album Save Rock and Roll. Now, the album did not live up to the album title, but the band's sound began showing less emo and more like elements of pop, electronic beats, and like R&B. And my point is, by the 2015 record, I accepted the fact that the punk rock days were behind them, and on the plus side, they were no longer making pretentious emo music like they did in the mid-2000s. So not only was I able to enjoy American Beauty, that one they did, and also the movie, I was curious about the sound of this latest album. So I was like, all right, I can actually see where this is going. Originally, Mania was supposed to be released in September of 2017, but the band pushed it back to January of this year because they weren't happy with the way it sounded. So they're like, let's go back to the studio. Let's make this a really good album. We gotta yeah. They're like, we gotta show these guys that we are gonna make an album that you guys are going to love. Because the critics are gonna their pants and do backflips when they hear this. Also, the track listing is of the album is actually different than the digital release version, which is the version that I heard. I don't know if you listen to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Me too.
So we're doing the digital one because honestly, I don't think I've ever heard a Fall Out Boy album that had any kind of consistent continuity that is important. So they're all like random songs anyway. So I'm like, I don't think it's gonna matter which version we review. So the album starts with that song "Young and Menace," which combines like sporadic like electro-pop beats with like singer Patrick Stump's falsetto voice. And it's very quiet atmospherically during like the verses, but then immediately switches to like this like crazy like programmed electronic guitar and drum like back and forth like beat during the hook.
It sounded less like electro-pop or whatever the you just said, and more like a bunch of raccoons and possums /fighting in a dumpster.
Yeah, good point. The
song loud metallic clanging and screeching.
Yes, it's like you said, it's as off-putting as is meaningless.
Yes, yes, that's the perfect way to describe the first song.
So they are off to a bad start with me right away with that song. Now we'll get to the next track called "Champions," which is a more standard rock pop song that sounds like it's a contender for like the music during the buffers. During like the breaks during like NBA finals. I
was thinking of if Pepsi decided to double down on that commercial they put out a couple of years ago with the Jenner daughter or whatever,
Kylie Jenner.
Yeah. I feel like this song would go well.
That could work too, but
it's very inoffensive and meaningless while still having an air of pretending it's like revolutionary and interesting.
Yeah. They're basically saying in the lyric like I can do anything, but I feel like this song's more like trying to compete with the Queen song, and it's like we need a new like anthem for like a music like teams to like play like to like pump them up in the locker room, stuff like that. Doesn't work.
No.
So it's like they're trying, and it's like no, I don't know if you're trying at all. I really didn't like feel any songs on this album. There was no impression left on me at all until like the song "Hold Me Tight" or "Don't." It's like kind of a Caribbean influenced song. It's like little upstrokes on the guitars
I
during
could
like the
not
hook.
stand.
You don't like that song? I thought that was like
why are we doing like dub and reggaeton? Like,
Yeah.
what is the point of this? Are you guys like really into that, or is it just like, f it, put that in?
I thought like at that moment there it's like a song I can actually remember because everything else was like I don't remember how it went. This song was like okay,
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay,
I listened to this album actually twice because I was surprised at how quick it was over.
yeah,
Because I got fed up, and I was like, I think I need to take a break, and then it was over. I was like, oh, that's perfect. Like by the time I'm sick of it, it ends.
10 tracks, not so bad.
I listened to it a second time just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And like I remembered the songs, but it was just kind of it's kind of like when you walk into a mall and then you hear a song playing and you're like, I think I remember this song. It's like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like it sounds familiar, but you can't like sing it. Like you can't hum along to it even though you've heard it before.
Exactly. So you're saying, Drew, no songs you had any fondness for at all?
There wasn't a single part of this album I had any fondness for.
One song I did like kind of like, okay, this is not bad, was like the song The Last of the Real Ones, because it's got kind of got like an arena rock sound. Like the production was Stump's like vocals that change from like octaves from here to there. I thought was like energetic tune. I'm like, okay, I can see this being like on the radio, and I don't hate it. They had a moment where I'm like, this is tolerable. And that's all I can ask for right now because I'm
part
like
of this
about
album that was tolerable.
Okay, I'm like 4 songs in. I'm like I've reached a tolerable level, and that's probably because Drew did not hear the previous record, and I did. And I was
it
like,
worse than this?
I thought it was really good, and that was me back then. That was a younger Jarrell. Now this is the new Jarrell, cynical Jarrell. Pointing out all the flaws of bands. And I'm thinking to myself right now, like, this is not living up to what you guys did.
So you were just happy to be there. You were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah.
You had just your way into a podcast. You had sex with a big old fat businessman with a cigar to get your own show. And you were like, oh, I finally did it, guys.
I was like, buy this ratings for everybody.
I sucked a lot of but I finally got in.
I was like, this is, and then I was just like, I got to go back to the album and see if I really liked it. There's a lyric I got to ask you about, Drew.
Oh, let's talk about the fucking lyrics.
The lyric that stood out to me, the one lyric that stood out to me was when he says, I'll stop wearing black when they make a darker color.
I didn't get a chance to Google it.
Okay.
I've heard that before.
I'm like, is that from the Addams Family? And if it is, that's not something Ivy Wendy said?
It might not even be. It might be from another song because he's ripped off lyrics from other songs.
He's totally doing on this album, yeah.
Before,
yeah.
The singer of American Nightmare actually sued Fall Out Boy for stealing American Nightmare lyrics in the past.
Oh, okay. Because I know they're saying like lyrics on this album from like other songs, but I thought it was supposed to be like an ode to pop music.
There's a couple of turns of phrases that sound familiar, and then everything else is just really boring and repetitive.
Yeah.
And the ones that I'm like, oh, that's kind of clever. It's like I know I've heard that somewhere.
That's what I had with that song, that lyric. I'm like, that's really clever, and I'm like, that's so emo. I'm like, that sounds familiar. That's the song Wilson I'm talking about, and that's my problem with this album. I have a lot of problems. One of them is even if they have like a catchy chorus, the lyrics are so like ambiguous. The song comes off as random lines accompanied by music. And in the case of music, it's equally as arbitrary and forgettable. Like
arbitrary is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, song "Church," for example, way too overproduced, which is the whole album. The whole album's really overproduced in a bad way.
Yeah, was there even any instrumentation on this album?
Yeah, it sounds like when I hear drums kick
every once in a while you'll hear a drum, but then electronic drums kick in after that.
Yeah, and the guitars are really like manufactured as well.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Church, I thought was like an alright song with the grandioso choir in the background, but then everything's happening in a song, and then it ends like 3 minutes later. It's like you don't even let the song breathe. It's like it's just too much you're putting into a song.
It just kept going, that song.
Yeah.
It started, and then it had that one part, and then it was over.
Yeah.
And it was like there was no ebb and flow to it. There was no peaks and valleys. It was just song and then done. F it, let's move on.
Yeah. This band, this album reminds me of stuff I would hear from like Panic at the Disco, like the song after that called Heaven's Gate. Like his voice and the way the song is structured, like something that Panic at the Disco would do, or like stuff you would hear from Maroon 5. And it's like, you guys are sound like those two bands. And it's like, yes, I know you guys were around before them, but you have no identity now. Now you sound like other people doing stuff. You're trying to do what people did already. And then this leads to my final problem is like the music is really empty. All the production and the generic like electro-pop that comes in like sucks all the like, you know, excitement out of every song. Now there are no longer emo songs. They no longer do emo music, which means they have no more emotions, which is like the preface of emo. I'm gonna
correct. It is a soulless, pointless album.
I'm actually going to rate this now because I think we on this album enough where I'm gonna have to try to think of some positivities with this. And like I said before, I found a song that was tolerable. And when they do the whole like Caribbean stuff, like they're doing the song "Hold Me Tight," and then the other song they did, which is called "Sunshine Reptide," which dancehall artist Burna Boy is on there. He does like a verse on there, which everyone's hating on that. I'm like, this verse is tolerable. I have no problem with it. You know, why are you getting so mad about this? It's not horrible. It's just there, and it just makes sense to put a reggae artist in this moment. It's not hurting the song or helping it whatsoever. But the product,
it's not horrible. It's just not good.
I don't want to slit my throat listening to it.
Okay,
you know, it's fine. You know, the result is like, I think this problem with this album, when you look at the way it's produced or the production behind it, it's like too many cooks in the kitchen, like putting all their stuff in the recipe, and then they bring it out so fast. It's like you didn't give it time to like marinate.
They are white, so
yeah,
it's unsurprising that there was no flavor to it.
I'm gonna give this album skip this. It's really disappointing that they made a pretty good, solid record last time, but you feel like you can't expect so much out of Fall Out Boy. They're trying to do like generic pop music, but they're trying to have their own twist to it, and it's just like, it's just not resonating. You know, it's just there. What do you think, Drew?
Here's what I think. I have no idea who this is for. The good-natured pop-punk of old-school Fall Out Boy is completely gone, replaced by this unholy mishmash of competing and contradictory genres. It's an absolute disaster on every level. It's overproduced, underthought, repetitive, and uncreative. I understand it's hard out there for guitar-driven bands these days. People want catchy, inoffensive, sterile, mechanical music. But just throwing a bunch of disparate music genres in a blender and seeing what comes out is not a solution. It's sloppy, boring, and almost shocking in its ineptitude. Full disclosure, and I mentioned this earlier, I've never been a Fall Out Boy fan. I've always found them generic and lacking, but this album made me pine for old Fall Out Boy. And this is a glimpse into the mindset of drummer Andy Hurley, who spends his off time drumming in two amazing hardcore bands, presumably as a palate cleanser for whatever the this is. And speaking of, if you'd like some great, thoughtful music by one of the members of Fall Out Boy, then try last year's No Cure for Death by Sect or Invisible Battles Against Invisible Fortresses by Race Trader. Just whatever you do, stay away from this album. I give this album a this.
Jesus.
Initially, and I want to explain myself because I know that you got questions. Initially, I was going to give this a skip this, and then I started really thinking about what makes an album a skip this versus a this.
Yeah.
Is there any saving grace on an album than they get a skip this? If there's just any, like a single, it doesn't even have to be a whole song, just a single riff. Where I'm like, okay, this isn't bad. And I think that's the difference between that Fergie album versus that Weezer album. They had one song, Weezer, that was like, all right, it's fine. They got a skip this.
Right.
Fergie, I could not find anything good. And this is the same. I did not find any moment of this album enjoyable. And even on the way over here, I was thinking, does this really need a this? And then you told me that they decided to hold off and go back into the studio to make this quote unquote better? Are you kidding me? Just this album forever in that case.
Yeah, okay, I agree. I see what your point. That's a good idea, man. This album, but I'm not going to lower my rating because I've heard worse than this.
Awful.
So let us know.
This album is awful.
Let us know what you think in the comments, or send us an email what you thought of the new Fall Out Boy album. If you liked it, or if you think it's as bad as we thought, let us know. And also give your rating as well. We appreciate that.